Red lights bled across the bridge as the frigate Kestrel screamed through debris. Captain Aria Vale said, "Seal deck 7 and reroute power, now D." The hull groaned like a wounded animal, and the stars looked colder than law. Dr. Elias Monroe said, "Breathe, Captain, and hold the line." A specter of static rose on the main display, an alien signal threading the void with knives. Lieutenant Rhea Cade said, "Contact is hostile, or it's a lure." Aria's hands trembled once, then stilled, memory clawing at her spine. Nova Hart said, "The pattern repeats like a heartbeat." The Kestrel's engines coughed and caught, grinding past a firelit carcass of a carrier. Aria said, "No one dies today because I hesitate." The signal flared, a crown of thorns across the grid, and somewhere metal screamed again. Elias said, "You're not your last mistake, Captain." The message sharpened into words that tasted like ash. Silence settled after the storm, and the bridge lights softened to a tired glow. Aria Vale said, "I hear them in the metal, the ones we couldn't save." Dr. Elias Monroe said, "Grief is a tide, not a sentence." The crew drifted back to stations, wearing their fear like thin armor. Aria touched the scar above her brow as if it held a key she'd lost. She remembered a colony burning behind a retreat she ordered, and never forgave. Elias said, "You carry weight so others can breathe." Aria said, "I carry ghosts." The waveform floated on the main screen like a mirage that might grant absolution. Rhea Cade said, "We should strike first, before that shape becomes a noose." Aria's voice steadied as a compass in rain. She said, "We'll live long enough to choose our fight." The ship listened, and for a breath, the galaxy did too. The alien signal whispered like a memory of rain on a roof she once knew. "Wah." Aria Vale said, "If it's a trap, it knows my name." Nova Hart said, "It echoes patterns from lost beacons." Rhea Cade said, "Or a predator mimicking a lullaby." The bridge crew watched their captain choose between broken paths. Elias Monroe said, "Mercy and caution can hold the same hand." Aria's pulse slowed as she counted breaths, the way pilots count stars. She said, "Plot a parallel approach and keep our teeth hidden." The Kestrel turned with the poise of a knife, deciding where to land. Nova said, "Amplitude rising, but it's not broadcasting coordinates." Rhea said, "Then it wants us blind." Aria said, "I've been blind before and survived." The signal thrummed, and the ship leaned into the dark. Down in the armor bay, tension hung like chains. Rhea Cade said, "You hesitate, and people die." Commander Jackson Myers said, "You rush and everyone dies." He wore failure like a medal he never polished. Aria Vale said, "I won't repeat the same mistake, or invent a new one to please fear." Elias Monroe said, "Fear can warn without ruling." Rhee's jaw set as if she could bite through fate. Jackson said, "We need doctrine and a miracle." Aria said, "We make our own doctrine and borrow the miracle." The Kestrel thrummed, gathering courage from old bones. Nova Hart lingered by the hatch, clutching a tablet like a shield. She said, "The signal feels sad." Silence cracked, and even Rhea looked away. The signal cracked open like a seed, and a voice crossed the void with temple hush. Lord Cassian Reese said, "Surrender, and I will spare what remains." His words arrived, clothed in velvet and knives. Aria Vale said, "You spared no one before." Elias Monroe said, "Charisma is not mercy." Rhea Cade said, "Give me firing solutions and an apology later." Nova Hart whispered that the waveform wasn't his, just his mask. Aria said, "He hunts with borrowed thunder." The dreadnought's shadows swelled until it became a continent of iron. Aria said, "Hold course, minimize signature, and prepare decoys." The bridge steadied around her like a heartbeat finding time. Somewhere deep, the Kestrel chose to live. The Kestrel's mess hall buzzed with whispers that smelled of fear and burnt rations. Rhea Cade said, "Someone fed Reese our coordinates." Aria Vale said, "Accusations fracture faster than bullets." Elias Monroe said, "Truth always bleeds out, but usually too late. Nova Hart clutched her tablet like a prayer book, eyes wide with unease. Jackson Meyer leaned on the wall, bitterness sharpening his voice. We bleed because command hesitates. Aria's jaw locked, the scar above her brow pulling tight. She said, no one aboard betrays this ship while I draw breath. Elias said, resolve must be tempered with listening, Captain. Rhea muttered, loyalty is fragile when the void promises power. The room stilled, as if the ship itself listened, holding its secrets in trembling metal bones. The Kestrel's flank caught a barrage of plasma, rattling bones as alarms screamed. Aria Vale, said Brace. Vent starboard batteries and roll us clear. Rhea Cade shouted, Reese isn't probing, he's hunting. Consoles erupted with red glyphs as sparks showered across the bridge. Elias Monroe steadied a collapsing ensign, muttering steel bends, but spirit does not. Nova Hart cried, multiple signatures. He brought escorts. Jackson Meyer cursed, then he's choking us before we even aim. Aria gritted, we cut through, we survive, or we die small. The Kestrel spun on thrusters, hull groaning like an old wound. Ree's eyes blazed, give me targets, and I'll bleed them out of the sky. The ship obeyed, lurching toward fire. After the barrage, the medbay throbbed with wounded breathing. Aria Vale said, every scar I add to this ship is my shame. Elias Monroe said, a scar is proof of survival, not defeat. He pressed sealant over a seared arm, his hands steady against chaos. Rhea Cade leaned in with fire in her voice. We can't wait for Reese to tighten the noose. Elias met her glare with weary calm. Rage wins battles, not wars. Aria whispered, then teach me how to lead beyond scars. Elias said, listen more than you command, and they will follow. Nova hovered at the hatch, voice soft, the signal still pulses, it hasn't stopped calling us. The medbay smelled of iron and smoke, and hope felt brittle. In the engineering deck, shadows clung to pipes and heat, shimmered like ghosts. Survivor Kalen Dross emerged from a crawl space, grease streaking his face. Kalen, voice graveled, said, you're running blind into the same jaws that chewed me. Aria Vale said, then tell me what waits in the dark. Kalen's eyes burned with haunted fire. They strip ships like carrion, leaving husks. Reese uses them. Rhea Cade spat. Or maybe you just crawled back to lie. Elias Monroe placed a calming hand. Pain doesn't lie, it scars truth deep. Kalen said, I've lived through what your crew can't imagine. Aria stared into the dark tunnels, hearing echoes of screams not her own. The ship thrummed uneasy, as though it believed him. The War Council gathered in the strategy chamber, walls humming with projection light. Aria Vale said, every path ahead carries knives. Elias Monroe said, a leader bleeds first so others don't drown. Rhea Cade jabbed the hollow, we strike now, cripple Reese before he grows untouchable. Jackson Meyer shook his head, strike now, and we become dust on his boots. Kalen Dross growled, I've seen what happens to those who wait, ashes and silence. Nova Hart whispered, the signal still begs, like someone trapped inside it. Aria closed her eyes, remembering a colony's fire, then opened them steel hard. She said, we fight, but not blind. We fight where he doesn't expect. The chamber flickered, and fate coiled around them like smoke. The Kestrel drifted into a dust-veiled corridor of space, and static cleared to reveal encrypted text scrolling across the comms. Nova Hart said, it's not Riss, it's someone else. Aria Vale narrowed her eyes, then someone hides in his shadow. Elias Monroe murmured, a whisper that knows when to speak is no accident. Rhea Cade said, trap or ally, doesn't matter, we can't ignore it. The signal flickered coordinates that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jackson Meyer grumbled, phantoms don't save lives. Kalen Dross growled, sometimes phantoms know what the living don't. Aria said, we follow, but with teeth bared. The hidden owl's presence brushed against the ship like a hand guiding a lost traveler, and the crew felt the weight of unseen eyes. In the war bay's corner, a figure staggered into the light, armor tarnished and eyes hollow. Jackson Meyer said, "I thought you were dead." Commander Saren Alaric rasped, "I should be." The tragic hero stood like a monument cracked by storms. Aria Vale whispered, "You served with my father." Saren's voice carried guilt like chains. "I led them into fire and crawled out alone." Elias Monroe said, "The broken can still build bridges." Saren shook his head, "My bridges burn behind me." Rhea Cade clenched her jaw, "Then prove your ruin still has teeth." Nova Hart's voice was soft. "He's sad like the signal." Kalen Dross muttered, "Sad Mendy fast." Saren's shadow fell long across the steel, heavy with ghosts. Later, in the shadowed corridor, Rhea Cade whispered to Arya, "Someone leaks more than air." Her eyes flicked to Kalen, then to Jackson. Arya said, "Paranoia eats discipline." Rhee's reply cut sharp, "So does betrayal." Kalen growled, "I've survived more hells than you've fought." Jackson Myers smirked, "And yet suspicion fits you like skin." Arya raised her voice, "Enough. We bleed out faster fighting shadows." Elias Monroe approached, voice calm, "Doubt corrodes faster than rust, Captain." Nova Hart stepped in, "The signal feels tangled, like someone twisting threads inside us." Arya touched her scar and whispered, "Then we unravel only what we must." The corridor lights flickered, as though agreeing with the doubt in their voices. The observation deck stretched wide, windows cracked with faint scars of plasma. Beyond, the nebula rolled like a living ocean, colors shifting with menace. Nova Hart whispered, "It's beautiful and wrong." Aria Vale said, "Everything beautiful here is edged with teeth." Kalen Dross muttered, "That storm swallowed fleets before yours." Elias Monroe answered softly, "And yet storms break when light finds them." Saren Alaric's shadow loomed, "Or storms consume until no one remembers the light." Rhea Cade gripped her holster, restless. "So what are we waiting for? An invitation?" Arya's voice was steady steel. "We wait until the storm itself tells us how to kill it." The nebula flashed, and shapes stirred within, hinting at leviathans unseen. Private chamber lit in shadows revealed a tall projection, Lord Cassian Rhys cloaked in crimson, eyes burning with charisma and venom. Rhys said, "You run circles like rats while I redraw the stars." Aria Vale stood tall, "Your stars burn on bones." Rhys smiled, "Bones build empires." Elias Monroe said, "Empires collapse under their own cruelty." Rhys leaned closer, "And yet you follow my music." Nova Hart whispered, "He bends the signal, makes it wear his mask." Saren Alaric growled, "Your empire will drown in its own blood." Rhys said coldly, "And you'll drown first, traitor." The chamber dimmed as his projection bled into smoke, leaving only silence heavy with promises of war. The bridge air throbbed with tension as alarms dimmed into silence. Aria Vale said, "Report." Rhea Cade's console blinked with red glyphs. She whispered, "Systems compromised from inside." Jackson Meyer laughed bitterly. "And now the mask slips." Kalen Dross snarled, "Betrayal stinks like rot." Rhea stood rigid, eyes flashing. "I did what had to be done. Rhys promised a future worth more than your ghosts." Arya's voice broke like iron. "You sold lives for whispers." Elias Monroe said, "Even loyalty broken can still seek redemption." Rhea snapped, "Redemption buys nothing but graves." Nova Hart trembled. "Why, Rhea? You were my shield." The silence burned hotter than any fire as betrayal carved the crew open. The chamber shuddered as a soft light revealed a small figure. Inara Solace, the emotional catalyst. Nova Hart gasped, "She's just a child." Inara, voice trembling, said, "I heard the signal calling." Aria Vale bent down, scar gleaming. "What do you carry?" Inara whispered, "Hope. But it hurts." Elias Monroe said, "Sometimes innocence feels pain first." Rhea Cade scoffed, "Children don't win wars." Kalen Dross growled, "But they remind us why we fight." Saren Alaric's shadow stirred, "Or why we fall when hope burns away." Inara clutched a small device glowing faintly. She said, "It's inside me, and it wants out." The crew stared as if the galaxy had just changed shape. Across the void, Reese's dreadnought loomed larger, engines glowing crimson like molten veins. His voice thundered over comms, "See how mercy bends to fire." A captured frigate was torn apart on screen, crew spilling into the abyss. Aria Vale whispered, "Monster." Reese smiled. "Monster, yes, but you're monster, Captain, because you trained me once." Elias Munro muttered, "The seeds we plant return in thorns." Saren and Alaric clenched fists. "I'll see him buried." Nova Hart cried, "Stop it, please." Reese tilted his head, "Then surrender, and I'll stop." Aria said, "I'd rather burn than bow." The crew watched as entire lives winked out, fury and fear igniting as one. In the chapel-like alcove of the ship, Elias Munro bowed his head before the dim flame of the memorial wall. He whispered, "How long can faith bend before it breaks?" Aria Vale entered quietly, long enough to keep us breathing. Elias sighed. "I believe in redemption, Captain, but belief wavers when blood runs endless." Aria touched his shoulder. "Then believe for me, if not for yourself." Elias looked up, eyes wet but steady. "The light flickers, but I'll guard it still." Ree's voice cut from the doorway, "Guard it all you want. Faith won't stop plasma." Aria answered firmly, "But faith keeps us from becoming Reese." The silence carried weight heavier than any hull. The crew gathered again in the strategy chamber, hope a flicker and betrayal, a wound still bleeding. Aria Vale said, "We fight on, even torn." Saren Alaric growled, "Every battle is a step toward death." Kalen Dross snarled, "Better death with teeth than life on chains." Nova Hart said softly, "The signal, it's crying louder." Inara Solis held her glowing device, whispering, "It wants me to choose." Elias Munro said, "Then choose to live, and we'll fight to protect it." Rhea Cade stood apart, eyes hard. "You'll never stop Reese without me." Arya's scar caught the glow as she answered, "Then fight beside us or die as his pawn." The chamber's light pulsed with tension, a storm waiting to break. In the captain's quarters, shadows fell over Aria Vale as she stared at a cracked hollow photo of her lost colony. She whispered, "I ordered their retreat," but only ashes followed. Elias Munro said gently, "Your ghosts are not your chains." Aria clenched her fists. "Reese was my protege, my blade, and I forged him into this monster." Saren Alaric rumbled, then cut him down and balanced the ledger. Nova Hart said softly, "You taught him to fight, but you still fight for hope." Aria's voice shook, "And every death since is mine to carry." Elias touched her shoulder. "Burden is not destiny, it is choice." Aria looked at the scar above her brow and said, "Then my choice is war." The comms chamber flickered alive as the hidden ally revealed themselves. Dr. Lyra Vey, a rogue scientist wrapped in shadows. Lyra said, "You think you fight Reese, but you fight something older." Aria Vale narrowed her eyes. "Then, unmask your game." Lyra smiled faintly. "The signal is no weapon but a door, and the child is its key." Elias Munro said, "Secrets corrode even noble intent." Lyra answered, "Intent is irrelevant, survival is not." Rhea Cade spat, "You drip riddles while we bleed." Lyra's eyes glowed in the hollow. "Without me, you bleed faster." Nova Hart whispered, "She knows the signal's voice." Aria said, "Then speak plainly, or I cut you out." Lyra whispered, "The galaxy is not Rissa's prize, it's the signal's." In the observation dome, Inara Solis pressed her glowing device against her chest. She said, "It's speaking louder and it hurts." Nova Hart reached for her, whispering, "Don't let it break you." Elias Munro murmured, "Pain speaks truth before hope." Saren Alaric said grimly, "Or pain feeds on innocence until nothing remains." Inara's eyes shone with tears. "It shows me stars breaking and voices screaming." Aria Vale knelt, scar glinting. You are not their weapon, you are our light. Inara trembled, but what if my light burns you too? Aria clasped her hands, then we burn together, and live through it. The dome shivered with energy, as if the device itself stirred the stars. Kalen Dross leaned against a flickering console, eyes shadowed with pain. He said, I've seen what waits beyond that signal, things older than empires. Aria Vale asked, what did you see? Kalen's voice cracked, leviathans in the dark, whispering promises. My crew followed, and none came back. Rayacade scoffed, and yet you stand alive. Kalen growled, alive doesn't mean untouched. Elias Monroe said softly, survival can scar deeper than death. Kalen's fists trembled. The signal wants more than voices, it wants vessels. Nova heart shivered. Vessels for what? Kalen's eyes glowed with dread, for gods who feed on stars. The chamber lights dimmed as if agreeing with his words. The strategy chamber flared with holograms as the crew gathered. Aria Vale said we fight Reese, but the true war is older than him. Lyra Vay's projection sneered, at last you see the strings. Inara Solis clutched her device, it wants me to open the door. Elias Monroe said, doors can free, but also unleash. Saren Alaric growled, then seal it forever. Rayacade snapped, seal it, and Reese still wins. Kalen Dross muttered, open it, and we all drown. Nova Heart cried, then maybe we need to step through before he does. Arya slammed her hand on the holomap, Scar catching the glow, then our fate is chosen in fire, not in fear. The chamber pulsed as if alive. The council chamber felt colder than space itself. The crew fractured into tense silence. Aria Vale said, we cannot fight if we tear at each other first. Rayacade spat. Trust is gone, Captain. Don't pretend otherwise. Kalen Dross growled. Suspicion keeps you alive. Elias Monroe answered calmly. Suspicion also kills before the enemy does. Saren Alaric's voice carried like stone. A divided blade breaks on first strike. Nova Heart said quietly, the signal pulses faster when we argue. Inara Solis whispered, it hurts when you fight. It wants me to choose sides. Arya slammed her scarred fist on the table, then choose survival, all of you. No more shadows. We stand, or we fall now. The chamber shook as if the ship itself demanded unity. In the dim war bay, Saren Alaric tightened the clasps of his battered armor. He said, every mistake demands a price. This is mine. Aria Vale said, your death buys nothing, I can't lose myself. Saren shook his head. A broken sword cannot lead a charge, but it can break an enemy's shield. Elias Monroe said quietly, redemption at the cost of breath is still death. Saren placed a trembling hand on his chest plate. Better to die standing than rot waiting. Rayacade muttered, if you go alone. Nova Heart's eyes glistened, but if he doesn't go, maybe none of us live. Saren looked at Aria, voice rough. Let me fall where I once failed, and make it mean something. The Kestrel erupted into chaos as Reese's fleet descended. Aria Vale shouted, all batteries fire, make them bleed. Plasma flared across the void, shaking the hull. Rayacade's voice burned, targets locked, sending them to hell. Kalen Dross growled, brace or break. Elias Monroe steadied falling crew, muttering, hold, hold, hold. Nova Heart cried, their numbers multiply. Too many. Inara Solis clutched her glowing device, eyes wide, the signal is screaming. It wants me to open it. Saren Alaric roared, then I'll buy you time. Explosions tore through the stars, and the dreadnought shadowed them like a devouring beast. Arya's scarred face hardened. We fight until the last bolt leaves the chamber. In the heart of fire, Aria Vale finally embraced the weight of command. She said, every ghost I carry brought me here, and I lead them now. Elias Monroe said, then lead us beyond death, Captain. Nova Heart's voice cracked, the signal bends, it listens to you. Rayacade, defiant yet resolute, then let's make Reese choke on it. Kalen Dross growled, I'll bleed before I bend again. Inara Solis whispered, "It wants you to speak for it." Aria's scar burned as though the past itself branded her. She said, "Then hear me, Galaxy. I will not bow, and neither will they." The crew's gazes turned toward her, bound by one voice that silenced doubt and steadied hands. The Dreadnought's bridge appeared in shimmering projection, Rise's face a mask of steel and fire. Rhys said, "At last you lead, Aria. My greatest creation finally grows teeth." Aria Vale's voice was steady, "And those teeth will tear out your throne." Rhys smirked, "You made me, and now you'll die by me." Elias Monroe said, "No creation escapes consequence." Rhea Cade hissed, "Let me end him." Inara Solis trembled, "The signal surges." "I can't hold it." Kalen Dross barked, "Then release it and burn them all." Saren Alaric raised his sword. "If this is the last stand, then let it be carved into eternity." The galaxy itself seemed to hush as predator and prey locked eyes. The battlefield burned in silence, the void littered with broken hulls and drifting lives. Aria Vale stood tall, voice fierce, "Fire everything we have, end Rise's shadow." Rhea Cade roared, "Targets locked. This is for every ghost." Plasma cannons screamed, shattering through the Dreadnought's shields. Elias Monroe whispered, "Let light tear through cruelty." Saren Alaric charged forward into a boarding tube, voice rising. "He'll carve his empire down to nothing." Nova Hart clung to Inara's arm, crying, "Hold on, we're almost through." Inara Solis closed her eyes, whispering, "The signal is inside me, and I can't contain it much longer." The void glared crimson as war and destiny collided in fire. On the Dreadnought's bridge, Rhys smirked as flames consumed his empire. He said, "Even in defeat, I define you." Aria Vale stormed forward, scar burning bright. "No, you define yourself, and I end you." Rhys laughed bitterly, "You were always my reflection, Captain." Saren Alaric, bleeding from his armor, bellowed, "Then let steel silence your lies." Elias Monroe's voice trembled with sorrow. "Aria, remember mercy, even as you strike." Rhea Cade hissed, "No mercy for monsters." Inara's glow lit the room as she whispered, "The signal wants blood or light. Your choice decides." Aria raised her blade, saying, "Then I choose light, even if it burns me." The air trembled with final reckoning. The signal screamed through Inara's device, a pulse shaking the ship as if galaxies bent around her. Inara cried, "It's opening. I can't hold it." Nova Hart clutched her hand, then Daunt hold it alone. Elias Monroe's voice rose above the chaos. "Hope shared becomes stronger than despair." Aria Vale shouted, "Focus the light, burn the shadow, not the stars." Rhys snarled, "You cannot control gods, they consume." Saren Alaric roared, "Then let them consume me first." Inara's tears shone as she whispered, "I see the future, and it's ours." The device erupted, light cutting through flame, burning away shadows. Rhys screamed as his empire shattered into silence. The Dreadnought cracked apart, its carcass drifting into the void. Saren Alaric stood bloodied, a broken blade in his hand. He smiled faintly at last, "I am more than my mistakes." Aria Vale reached for him, voice breaking, "Don't leave us now." Saren shook his head. "This is where I belong, burning with the empire I once failed." Elias Monroe said softly, "A noble fall can still seed redemption." Nova Hart sobbed, "You saved us." Inara's glow dimmed, he chose to be light. Saren staggered, fell to one knee and whispered, "Carry the fire where I could not." With one last smile, he collapsed as the wreckage consumed him. The Kestrel floated battered but alive, stars reflected in its scarred hull. Aria Vale stood on the observation deck, her scar catching the dawn of a new nebula. She whispered, "We carry ghosts, but we live for the living." Elias Monroe said, "The fire endures because you chose to lead." Nova Hart clutched Inara's hand, whispering, "The galaxy feels quieter." Inara nodded softly, "But the signal still breathes, waiting." Kalen Dross muttered, Then we keep our blades sharp, because quiet never lasts. Rhea Cade crossed her arms. If Rhea's shadow rises again, we'll cut it down together. Aria lifted her chin, voice steady. Then let the galaxy know. The betrayed empire stands no more. But we do. Silence lingered, vast and eternal.